Good morning. And let me say something that might genuinely surprise you. Most people believe high blood pressure comes from stress, from salt shaken onto dinner, or from getting older. But what if I told you that for millions of people, the single biggest daily driver of their rising blood pressure isn't dinner at all, it's breakfast? The very meal most of us consider the safe one, the one we don't think twice about, may be doing more damage to your arteries than anything else you eat all day. Here's a number I want you to remember. Nearly 90% of American adults consume more sodium before noon than most people realize. And a large share of that comes not from an obvious salty snack, but from foods marketed as wholesome, heart-healthy, or simply breakfast. According to data from cardiovascular research groups tracking dietary sodium sources, processed breakfast foods are among the most underestimated contributors to daily sodium intake, precisely because they don't taste salty. I'm Dr. William Lee, and for years I've studied how everyday food choices quietly shape cardiovascular health long before anyone notices a symptom. And I need to tell you plainly, several of the most common breakfast staples in the average kitchen are doing far more to raise your blood pressure than the occasional restaurant meal or holiday dinner most people worry about. What makes breakfast particularly dangerous from a blood pressure standpoint isn't any single food. It's the combination of two factors most people never think about together: repetition and blind trust. Dinner tends to vary night to night. Breakfast, for most adults, is remarkably repetitive. The same cereal, the same bread, the same coffee order 5 or 6 mornings a week for years at a time. And because breakfast carries a cultural reputation as the simple or light meal of the day, we tend to scrutinize it far less than we scrutinize dinner. That combination, high repetition, low scrutiny, is exactly the environment in which small hidden sources of sodium and blood sugar spiking ingredients do the most cumulative damage over months and years entirely underneath our awareness. So in this video, I'm walking you through 7 specific breakfast foods that the research links to elevated blood pressure, not to scare you and not to tell you that you can never eat them again, but so you understand exactly what's happening and what to do instead. Stay with me until the end, because the 7th one is the one almost nobody suspects, and it might be sitting in your kitchen right now. Let's get into it. Why? This matters more as you get older. Before I get into the list, I want to explain briefly why sodium sensitivity in particular tends to increase with age, because it changes how seriously you should take everything that follows. As we get older, our kidneys become somewhat less efficient at excreting excess sodium, and our blood vessels naturally lose some of their elasticity, meaning the same amount of sodium that barely affected your blood pressure at 30 can produce a noticeably larger effect at 60 or 70. Researchers refer to this as increased salt sensitivity, and it's part of why blood pressure tends to creep upward with age, even when diet hasn't dramatically changed. It also means that the 7 breakfast foods on this list aren't hypothetical concerns. For many people over 50 or 60, they represent genuinely the largest modifiable piece of the blood pressure puzzle, more impactful than most people assume until they actually see the numbers on a label. Food 1, deli meat and breakfast sausage. This is the one most people already suspect, but few realize just how significant it is. A typical serving of breakfast sausage or bacon isn't just a little salty. It's often one of the single highest sodium items you'll eat all day, sometimes containing 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium in just 2 or 3 small links or strips. That's before you've added anything else to the plate. But sodium is only half the story. Processed and cured meats also contain compounds called nitrates and nitrites, used as preservatives and color stabilizers. Research has linked regular consumption of processed meat to measurable increases in arterial stiffness, a key factor in rising blood pressure, independent of sodium content alone. One large observational study following participants over several years found that those who regularly ate processed breakfast meats had meaningfully higher rates of hypertension diagnosis compared to those who rarely did, even after adjusting for weight and overall diet quality. The fix isn't necessarily elimination. It's substitution and portion awareness. A single link of sausage instead of 3. Choosing turkey bacon labeled reduced sodium, or better yet, replacing cured meat with a plant-based or egg-based protein, a few mornings a week, small shifts, repeated daily, are what move the needle on a number your doctor checks every visit. I think about a study that tracked a group of adults with borderline high blood pressure who were asked to simply swap processed breakfast meat for eggs or plain Greek yogurt 4 mornings a week, making no other changes to their diet, Within 8 weeks, average systolic blood pressure readings had dropped several points, a modest but genuinely meaningful shift, achieved through one single substitution at one single meal. It's a reminder that you don't need to overhaul your entire diet to see movement on this number. You need to identify the 1 or 2 habits doing the most damage and address those first. Food to breakfast cereal, even the healthy kind. This one surprises people the most because cereal boxes are covered in health claims, heart healthy, whole grain, low fat. But many popular cereals, including several marketed specifically toward health-conscious adults, contain surprising amounts of sodium as a flavor enhancer to offset the loss of fat and sugar used in lighter formulations. A single cup of certain popular cereals can contain 200 to 300 milligrams of sodium, comparable to a small bag of potato chips. A fact almost no one checks because we associate sodium with savory food, not something poured from a box with a cartoon or a heart symbol on the front. Layer onto that the refined carbohydrate content in many cereals, and there's a second mechanism at play. Diets high in refined carbohydrates and added sugar have been linked in multiple studies to increased insulin levels, and elevated insulin is now understood to directly promote sodium retention in the kidneys, meaning a sugary cereal can raise blood pressure through an entirely separate pathway from its sodium content alone, simply by how your body processes the sugar. The practical fix: read the sodium line, not just the front of the box. Look for cereals under 140 milligrams of sodium per serving and pair them with a protein source like nuts or Greek yogurt to blunt the insulin response. It's worth pausing here on something researchers call health halo, the tendency for a food carrying a heart symbol, a low-fat claim, or a whole grain label to be assumed healthy across every dimension, including sodium, when in reality, those claims typically refer to one single nutrient. Manufacturers aren't hiding this information, it's printed clearly on the nutrition panel. But very few of us actually turn the box around and read it, because the front already told us what we wanted to hear. Making a habit of checking that one line, sodium per serving, takes about 5 seconds and is, in my experience, the single most useful label reading habit for anyone managing blood pressure. A study examining grocery purchasing behavior found that shoppers presented with front-of-package health claims spent significantly less time reading the nutrition panel than shoppers looking at plain packaging with no claims at all. Essentially, the health claim itself reduced scrutiny, even though it said nothing whatsoever about sodium. That single finding tells you almost everything you need to know about why cereal, of all foods, so consistently surprises people when they finally check the label for themselves. Food 3. Instant oatmeal packets, plain oats, are genuinely one of the better breakfast choices available, but instant, flavored oatmeal packets are a different product entirely. And this is a distinction most people never make. A packet of flavored instant oatmeal, particularly maple brown sugar or fruit-flavored varieties, can contain 150 to 250 milligrams of sodium per packet, used to balance the sweetness and extend shelf life. Eat 2 packets, which many people do without a second thought, and you've quietly consumed close to 500 milligrams of sodium before 8 a.m., roughly a fifth of the daily limit recommended for someone managing blood pressure from a food most people consider virtually risk-free. The solution here is refreshingly simple. Buy plain rolled or steel-cut oats and season them yourself with cinnamon, fresh fruit, or a small amount of natural sweetener. You get the genuine cardiovascular benefits oats are known for, including soluble fiber that has been shown in research to modestly lower blood pressure over time without the hidden sodium load riding along with it. I know this sounds like a small, almost trivial change, but I want to walk you through the math because it illustrates something bigger about this entire video. Plain oats, cooked with water and topped with your own cinnamon and berries, typically contain under 10 milligrams of sodium naturally. 2 packets of flavored instant oatmeal can contain 50 times that amount. Same category of food, same healthy breakfast mental label, radically different sodium load, determined entirely by whether the manufacturer added flavoring and preservatives or whether you added your own. This is the exact pattern that repeats across nearly every food on this list, and once you start noticing it, it becomes much easier to spot in your own kitchen. Food 4, pancakes, waffles, and breakfast breads. Here's a category people rarely connect to blood pressure at all, because the conversation about pancakes usually centers on sugar or calories. not sodium, but baking powder and baking soda, the leavening agents that make pancakes and waffles rise, are sodium compounds by chemical necessity. A stack of 3 pancakes made from a standard boxed mix can contain 400 milligrams of sodium or more before a single drop of syrup is added. Then there's the syrup itself, or more precisely, what commercial syrup does to blood sugar. Research on rapid blood sugar spikes has shown they trigger a corresponding rise in insulin, and as I mentioned earlier, insulin promotes sodium retention, creating a compounding effect where the pancake batter and the syrup are both nudging blood pressure upward through 2 different mechanisms simultaneously. This doesn't mean pancakes are forbidden. It means treating them as an occasional food rather than a weekday default. Watching portion size, and when you do have them, pairing with protein and fiber, berries, and a side of eggs, for instance, to soften the overall blood sugar response. There's an interesting piece of research here worth mentioning. The order in which you eat components of a meal appears to matter for blood sugar response. Studies on meal sequencing have found that eating protein and fiber-rich food before higher carbohydrate food, even within the same meal, measurably reduces the resulting blood sugar spike compared to eating the same foods in reverse order or all mixed together. In practice, that means if pancakes are on the table, eating your eggs or a handful of nuts first, and the pancakes second is a small, almost free adjustment that softens the metabolic impact of a meal you are going to eat anyway. Food 5, bottled or fresh squeezed orange juice. This one tends to generate the most pushback when I explain it because orange juice feels like the healthiest item on many breakfast tables. And to be fair, whole oranges are genuinely good for cardiovascular health. They're rich in potassium, a mineral that actively helps the body excrete excess sodium and relax blood vessel walls. The problem is what's lost when the fruit becomes juice. A whole orange contains meaningful fiber that slows sugar absorption. A glass of juice, even fresh squeezed, typically has that fiber stripped away, concentrating the natural sugar from 2 or 3 oranges into a beverage you can drink in under a minute. This produces a faster, sharper blood sugar and insulin spike than eating the whole fruit would. And as we've now covered twice, insulin spikes are directly tied to sodium retention and over time to elevated blood pressure. Studies comparing habitual juice drinkers to habitual whole fruit eaters have found meaningfully different metabolic outcomes over time, even when total fruit sugar intake was similar, largely attributed to this fiber difference. The fix is refreshingly simple: eat the orange instead of drinking it. If juice is truly your preference, a small 4-ounce portion alongside food, rather than a large glass on its own, meaningfully softens the effect. This same principle extends beyond orange juice to smoothies, which many people assume are automatically healthier because they contain whole fruit blended rather than juiced. Blending does preserve more fiber than juicing, which is genuinely a meaningful difference. But the blending process still breaks down the fruit's cellular structure far more than chewing does, which research suggests still produces a faster absorption curve than eating the fruit whole. A large smoothie made from 3 or 4 pieces of fruit can deliver a comparable sugar load to a full-size dessert, simply packaged in a way that feels virtuous. None of this means avoiding smoothies. It means being mindful of portion size and, when possible, adding a source of protein like Greek yogurt or nut butter to slow the absorption further. Food 6, flavored coffee creamers and sweetened coffee drinks, coffee itself in moderate amounts, has a fairly neutral to mildly positive relationship with long-term blood pressure in most research. The issue is rarely the coffee, it's what's being added to it. Many flavored liquid creamers contain both added sugar and sodium-based stabilizers to maintain shelf life and texture, and popular sweetened coffee drinks from coffee shops can contain surprising amounts of both sugar and sodium, particularly in caramel or salted flavor varieties where salt is added intentionally for taste contrast. A large flavored coffee drink can, in some cases, rival a fast food meal in both sugar and sodium content, consumed slowly over an hour, without ever registering as a meal in most people's minds, because this is often the very first thing many people consume in the morning. Sometimes on an empty stomach, the blood sugar and subsequent insulin response can be especially pronounced. The practical adjustment: unsweetened plant milk or a small amount of half and half with cinnamon or vanilla extract for flavor instead of flavored syrups, preserves the ritual of your morning coffee without the hidden metabolic cost. I want to be clear that this isn't an argument against coffee itself, or even against enjoying a flavored drink occasionally. Some research has actually associated moderate plain coffee consumption with slightly lower long-term cardiovascular risk in certain populations, likely due to naturally occurring plant compounds in coffee beans. The concern here is specifically about the sugar and sodium riding along in the flavoring syrup and creamer, additions that have nothing to do with coffee itself and everything to do with what's been mixed into the cup. Simply asking for half the syrup or making your own version at home with real cinnamon instead of a flavored pump keeps the parts of the ritual you enjoy while removing the parts working against your blood pressure. Food number 7, healthy whole grain or multigrain breads and bagels, and here's the one almost nobody suspects, the one I promised you at the start of this video. Bread, particularly the whole grain, multigrain, or artisan varieties marketed as the healthy choice, is one of the single largest cumulative sources of sodium in the average American diet. Not because any one slice is dramatically salty, but because sodium is a functional ingredient in commercial bread making used to control yeast fermentation and extend shelf life, and we tend to eat bread constantly in the background without ever thinking of it as a sodium food. A single bagel, the kind many people consider a light, virtuous breakfast choice compared to pancakes or sausage, can contain 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium on its own before any topping, spread, or cream cheese is added. Add deli meat and cheese on top, and a single breakfast sandwich can approach or exceed a third of an entire day's recommended sodium limit for someone managing blood pressure. This is precisely why bread is often called a stealth sodium food in nutrition research. It rarely tastes salty, so it never triggers the mental flag that cured meat or chips does. Even though the cumulative daily contribution, slice after slice, meal after meal, can be larger than any single obviously salty food on this list, the fix isn't necessarily giving up bread entirely, it's choosing lower sodium bakery options when available, checking labels rather than trusting front-of-package claims like whole grain or artisan, which speak to grain content, not sodium content, and being mindful of portion one slice or half a bagel rather than a full one, especially on days when other meals will also include bread or grain-based carbohydrates. To put the cumulative effect in perspective, imagine someone eating a bagel at breakfast, a sandwich on bread at lunch, and a couple of dinner rolls with their evening meal. None of these individually taste salty, none of them would show up on a mental list of salty foods, and yet added together, that single day could easily contribute over 1,500 milligrams of sodium from bread products alone before counting a single other ingredient, condiment, or seasoning added throughout the day. This is exactly why bread deserves a place on this list. Alongside foods that taste far saltier, the danger isn't in any one slice, it's in how invisibly it accumulates across an entire day, an entire week, an entire year. I'll leave you with one final thought on this particular food because I think it captures the theme of this entire video better than any of the others. When people ask me which single change would help their blood pressure the most, they almost always expect me to say, cut the bacon or stop adding salt at the table. And those things do help. But in my experience walking people through their actual daily intake, bread, quiet, background, eaten without a second thought multiple times a day, is very often the largest single contributor nobody had even considered a suspect. Sometimes the most powerful changes aren't the dramatic ones. They're the ones hiding in plain sight, in the food so ordinary we stopped questioning it years ago, bringing it all together so there you have it, 7 foods, and notice the pattern running through nearly all of them. It's rarely the obviously salty food that does the most damage over time. It's the foods we've mentally filed away as safe or healthy that we eat on autopilot day after day without ever checking a label because nothing about the taste warns us. None of this means living in fear of breakfast or memorizing sodium counts for the rest of your life. It means becoming aware of these 7 specific categories, making a few smart substitutions where they're easy, and paying closer attention to portion size on the days you do choose to enjoy them. Blood pressure responds to patterns sustained over months and years, not to any single meal, which means small, repeatable changes at breakfast. The very meal most people never think to examine can meaningfully shift that number over time. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed by 7 things at once, here's the same advice I gave in an earlier video, and I'll repeat it here because it matters just as much. Don't try to fix all 7 tomorrow morning. Pick the one that felt most surprising to you, or the one you already know is sitting in your pantry right now, and change just that one for 2 weeks. then add the next. Cardiovascular research on sustainable habit change consistently shows that gradual, stacked adjustments outlast dramatic overnight overhauls, and blood pressure improvement is a long game rewarded by consistency, not intensity. My goal with this channel has always been to translate research most people never see into information you can actually use at your own kitchen table. Not to replace the guidance of your own doctor, who understands your specific health history, medications, and blood pressure targets far better than I can from behind a camera. If you're currently taking blood pressure medication, please talk with your physician before making significant dietary changes, particularly around sodium and potassium intake, since some medications interact directly with both. Now, I want to hear from you. Of these 7 foods, which one genuinely surprised you the most? Leave a comment and tell me which one is sitting in your kitchen right now and which substitution from this video you're going to try first. I read every single one, and this community continues to be one of the most engaged and thoughtful I've had the privilege of being part of, and that's entirely because of you. If this video helped you look at your breakfast table a little differently, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because next week, I'm covering the specific overnight habit that's quietly raising many people's blood sugar, even when they haven't eaten a single bite since dinner. I'll put a link to a related video right here on the screen if you'd like to go deeper on that topic right now. Take good care of yourself. You are worth the effort.